Greetings, folks. Welcome to a reading of what's turned into a bit of an experiment to let me explain exactly what I mean, but I'll do it quickly. See, this started out when I asked my audience base via social media, who would like to be in a blackjack adventure? And, a few hands went up, digitally speaking, possibly because I'm not sure everybody really believed I was serious about it, because how do you do that sort of thing? But anyway, like I said, a few hands went up, and then as I talked more about it, and I sort of made it known through, Facebook and Instagram stories and things like that, more people raised their hands, and it started to get a little wild and a little crowded. so, so finally, I had to pick 12 real people that I could interact with enough, ask some questions, get some background on them, that sort of thing, and then write them into the story as central characters. Well, that process is turning into a whole bunch of fun. No, I mean, seriously, there's a lot of little things came out of it. And I'm still writing the story. I plan to release it in 2020. But, it's coming to me in I guess two different mediums. I mean, I'm trying to work in only one at a time, but it's come to me as two different ones. I mean, obviously there's the book, which is what I'm working on now, and which you'll have a sample of this evening. But a few years back, I did a Blackjack radio show. I mean, I wrote it, and it was produced and recorded at the Museum of Television and Radio Arts in New York City. And that was pretty exciting. I mean, we had a live audience, we had sound effects, we had music. It was theater, if you will, with microphones, and that was great. So writing this piece got me to thinking about, well, maybe it kind of fun to do this as a radio piece, or I guess for these times, digital times, and we'll call it audio theater, right, if you will. Time will tell how that works out. I mean, for now, it's the book, and that's what we're here for. And what you're going to hear now is a short chapter from somewhere near the middle. And I mean, things, as I work on the book, things will change, I'll continue shifting things, and, the story will sort of start to tell itself to me, and the characters will develop, and, that's a curious aspect of writing stories. And if you ever listen to me and Chris Ryan on our podcast, Tell the Damn Story, then you understand. If you don't write yourself, you'll understand from the podcast a lot of the processes involved. But anyway, I digress. Okay. Remember, what you're going to hear, is a work in progress. And I'm experimenting with using these real people as springboards to create these key characters, and not knowing exactly how they'll come out in the end is one of the things that makes this one of the more challenging and actually intriguing blackjack stories I've written in a long time. So, as folks are so fond of saying, without further ado, here it is, a sample chapter from Blackjack, A Cold Green Death. Arron didn't like running away. Never had, not since he and his sister were children back in Harlem. Yet here he stood at the back end of the ship's galley, trying to avoid a fight with the ship's second mate and a few of his friends. 4 days at sea, he'd put up with working 15 to 18 hours a day, mostly in the cramped lower decks of the ocean liner. He'd also put up with being called boy and other names by white crewmen and passengers no better than himself. Now Arron better understood why his father didn't want to return after the war, why being a soldier of fortune in Cuba and Europe made more sense to him than returning to America and his family. At least he didn't abandon us, Arron thought. He sent us money until Mama saved up enough to take us to join him, and we traveled all over, seeing sights Negroes never even dreamed of. 2 waiters glanced at Arron standing in the corner and muttered something about those people being lazy, good for nothing. Arron clenched his fists. Yeah, he thought, we saw so many things, while Father fought other men's battles instead of our own. But Arron knew he hadn't done any better. Just a few days ago, instead of facing a battle with gangsters in Harlem, he'd let Sheila May convince him that if he stayed, the fight would end in a bloodbath, and more of Harlem's residents would die, whether Arron won or not. It especially bothered him that one of the gangsters was a Negro about his age. Young, cunning, mean, and more than willing to use his own people. With those odds against him, Arron had reluctantly followed Sheila May's plan. She made a few phone calls, and by the dead of night he boarded the ocean liner filled with the rich and powerful and worked for them and the staff. Somewhat like the first scream cut through his thoughts. Then came the shouting, the yelling, the sound of people falling, and more screams. Instinctively, Arron rushed through the doors connecting the dining room to the kitchen, and came to a sudden stop as a gun muzzle pressed hard against his temple. "Don't move, boy. Don't move." The gunman held Arron by the kitchen door, along with several of the other waiters, and the dining room was in chaos. At a glance, Arron could count at least 12 gunmen, carrying an assortment of revolvers, rifles, and Tommy guns. The men were targeting many of the wealthy passengers, hustling them into a cluster on one side of the room. The men kept prodding and barking orders. Some of the crewmen tried to resist and were struck down viciously. The screaming and confusion rose to a climactic shrill, and then suddenly, silence. That's when Arron saw the man called Torrance parade in almost military fashion to the center of the room. He turned towards the outraged elite and smiled. "Do forgive me for interrupting your dinner hour. Or is this the cocktail hour? I always get those a bit confused. But it was important that I have your full attention." The ship's captain stepped forward, shouting, "What is the meaning of this?" Torrance snapped his fingers, and one of the gunmen struck the man in his stomach. "If you let me continue uninterrupted, I'll explain," Torrance said casually. "Though I'd be surprised if at least some of you hadn't figured it out already." One woman began sobbing and begging, Take my jewels, but don't hurt us, please, don't hurt us." "See? I knew someone would catch on." Torrance grinned as some of the wealthy began removing wallets, rings, and other jewelry. "Oh, no, no, no." He raised his hands. "No, it's going to cost much more than that," he said. "It's going to cost at least $20 million. We haven't that much money on the ship," the captain gasped, trying to stand. "Oh, I know," Torrance replied. "But your families, solicitors, and banks do." The crowd mumbled and muttered amongst themselves, but didn't dare raise their voices. Arron scanned the room again. Yes, there were at least 12 men, and perhaps one or two more just outside the door. There was nothing he could do at this point. Not yet, at least. Torrance winked. "Now, please try not to interrupt again. Where was I? Oh, yes. From this moment forward," Torrance continued, "you will follow the instructions given to you by my associates, these gentlemen with the guns. And in case you're thinking, oh, if I could escape the room and get help," Torrance opened his arms wide, "we have taken over the entire ship. Yes, there are more of us, and thus you will do as we say until otherwise informed. All of you must do what you're told." Calmly he turned to the wealthy captives. "And now this bit mainly concerns the 300 members of your elite gentry. We intend to send wires to those you love, or at least who you pretend to, letting them know that we have you, and that you'll be well taken care of, as long as they comply with my demands." What you ask is impossible. It's insane. They'll never believe." "Impossible?" Torrance dramatically raised his voice. "If you mean taking over the ship, well, my men and I have done it, so you can't mean that. The ransom. What I ask is far from impossible. The net worth of all your blue blood passengers combined is triple that amount." "Insane. Never believe. Torrance gazed around the room at his men. "Gentlemen." Instantly, his thugs drew back the bolts and hammers of their weapons and aimed them at the people closest to them. "Do something," the thought screamed in Arron's head. "Do something before—" Gunfire erupted in the room. Only 3 men pulled the trigger, but when it was over, 5 people lay dead on the floor. The shock, fear, and realization was paralyzing. People trembled and prayed, but almost in silence. In his short 25 years of life, Arron had seen this before. Then it was terrified villagers in South America, cowering as the very men he rode with, the ones meant to protect them, destroyed their homes and killed their friends and family. He'd failed to help them then. He'd failed to save them. He was back there again. His head felt light. His mind raced with incomplete thoughts. What had happened then? What was happening now? Breathing was hard. His arms trembled. His palms were sweaty. And then the steady, cultured sound of the pirate leader's voice cut through it all, giving Arron something to focus on, to ground him, and guide him back to this particular terrified reality. And guide him back to this terrifying reality. Now, Captain, I believe when you speak to them, your owners safe on shore with none but the embarrassment of this situation facing them, when you speak to the families of the wealthy who parade around here and the rest of the world as if ordained by God himself to trot upon those they believe lesser than themselves, when you speak to the bankers who lord over their money like all but that is of little or no consequence, no value, when you tell them what it sounds like to see 6 people shot down before you, 6 of the chosen few, a number that will continue to dwindle every hour on the hour until your decks are covered in their blood, which, by the way, runs red, not blue. I think they will know I am serious.